Now let us start reimagining the two situation in light of what we'll discuss for the next few minutes. Can we reimagine this? Feedback at its most basic, I don't need to, get into the details, but it's something very simple, right? It's a level playing field of conversation, like someone of you mentioned, where there's a situation to be dealt with, and both the people involved are looking at a mutually beneficial solution which can help you better the situation, right? I think that's what we can all agree on. Now, how can we do this as a team? So the same roles, instead of the giver and the taker, can we call them a provider and a seeker? Okay. Can we do a little nuanced understanding of what they are doing? The seeker obviously is trying to improve something. He wants to prove his worth. He wants to stay with the organization. He wants to contribute individually to his team, to his department. And what is the role of the provider? What is he trying to do? He's trying to contribute using his experience, trying to get to a situation where he sees probably he has more clarity than his team members who have a little bit of a lesser experience than him. He probably gets a more macro view of the situation than someone who is working a couple of levels below him in the hierarchy. So that is what he's trying to tell him, I can get a better macro view of the situation. But what can establish this conversation is if these two people uh, have a certain empathy in between themselves before the conversation starts. So this is probably, in our design thinking process, what we call as empathizing with your audience before you start crafting or a story or a narrative. So can these two people in this conversation, like Rohan mentioned, some pre-feedback, or like Atul mentioned, some context for the conversation, can they start at least understanding that, yes, both of us are on a common mission here, that empathy. What does this empathy lead to? Once this basic empathy ground is established, uh, you kind of are a little bit kinder to each other's perspective. You don't take it in a personal way. You don't think that, he's out there to screw me. Once you look at each other's perspective in that manner, a certain level of trust is developed, and then you want to be participative in that discussion. See, when this empathy and trust is missing, quite often the other person has, already closed all his mind to whatever you're going to share. So once this trust is established, probably that is the stage where new ideas can be generated, new solutions, new viewpoints can be worked upon. So quite often when a manager says, ki, things are stuck, give me something new, how can we move out of this rut? They jump to this before that empathy and the trust building process. And that is the reason why the subordinate might say, no, I don't have, anything. We are doing our job. We are doing our best. But there's no progress. There's no new idea or a new big idea coming on the table. Right?
So what this leads to, as Mandar explained beautifully, the whole concept of feedback, it's a level playing field. Clearly, there's no senior, there's no junior, nothing like that. Our basic premise is that feedback is an exchange of ideas. Now, if that core belief, if both the parties have, now of course one may have that belief, the other may not have that belief. The other may look at it as a one-sided perspective. So the person who's giving the feedback, it's probably incumbent on him to get the other party to believe that this is a exchange of ideas. We are at a level playing field here. And that's why that basic definition that you saw from us, that we are both invested in. See, for example, if my subordinate, if she is not delivering on her targets, it's not her problem alone, it's our problem, it's both of us our problem. We both are stakeholders in that problem. So this whole approach of beating her with a stick will probably not help me more. It probably does more disservice to me than it does to her, because she might just drop off and go and find another job. But I have lost an employee, I have to fill up that position, right? I have lost some time and money, right? So what if I can look at that performance issue of my employee as a collective problem rather than her problem, rather than berating her? Now, the last slide ended with generating ideas. How do we generate ideas, right? That's you have something where you can generate ideas. So this is called a rose, thorn, and bud technique. It's a universally accepted technique. Some of you might have even heard about this technique, but let me get a little bit into it, and then we can know about more about what is it that you think about this. So the first part is rose. In any situation, there is at least something that you might have liked. Okay, there's something that you might have liked. That is called a rose. And then when you talk about your roses, you might say something like, I hey, look, I really like the way you have done this, right? And in fact, even Malcolm mentioned it in the beginning where he talked about good things about people, right? So this is rose. You write something about that person. Then you come to thorns. Again, there is no chronology here in terms of you have to go in that way, but these are the three things that you normally cover in a feedback. In thorns, you're something that you don't like in what that person has done, or what that person is doing, or what is wrong with the situation. You want it to be immediately removed. But how will you frame it? You will frame it that next time, how about you try doing something, try doing this instead of X, or try doing Y instead of X, right? Now, look at the way you framed it. It's a suggestion, right? Next time, avoid this and do this instead, and tell me how it looks like, how it feels like, right? There again, you've taken down the point of confrontation. You are suggesting, you are not ordering, it's not a diktat, right? And finally, bud. Bud is, as when a flower blooms, there's a bud, it blossoms into a great flower, right? What are those ideas which have a potential to be developed? Right, if you work on that aspect of the problem, or maybe that aspect of your performance, that aspect of somebody's behavior, this is the possibility, this is where imagination kicks in. How would you say frame something like that? You probably say something like this, you know have you thought about this? Have you considered this possibility? Have you considered that if you do this, it might look like this, right? All of you see here, this is not based on confrontation. It's so you are earnestly trying to improve the situation because you yourself are a stakeholder, right? You yourself are, if you're a team lead, somebody from your team leaves, it's going to look bad on you. So you really want that person to succeed. And you are HR guys, we don't have to really tell you this, but what we're trying to say is that it did not be that confrontational. Now you know this. If imagine if the people you're giving feedback to, if they can know this as well, that this is not going to be a confrontational transactional process, we are going to be jointly sitting down and coming up with a lot of ideas. But there has to be some, for that to happen, you have to first have that foundation of empathy and trust. How do you build empathy? You earnestly inquire with that person, right? Sympathy is just based on first-hand knowledge. Empathy is when you really try to put yourself in the shoes of that person. And how do you do that? By asking more questions, by asking calibrated questions, right? If let's say my colleague Tanvi, if let's say she's not performed well over the last let's say 1 month, I would probably call her and ask her, "This is what I've noticed. Is there something bothering you at your home or in your personal life that you can share?" You know, you're trying to put yourself in that person's shoes and try to empathize. So with this RTB technique comes a way of storytelling. How do you do storytelling? How do you convey? So the bud part of your feedback is where the whole idea generation happens. Rose is something that is already there. Thorn is something that is already wrong with the thing. Bud is where it can improve, and this is the realm of possibilities where you need to explore. If you were to able to steer the feedback process in the realm of the bud or the possibilities, it becomes a really interesting exercise for both the parties, right? Now, what does this mean like? So let me give you some practical examples here. How could you do this? You could use anecdotes, or build scenarios. Now, what would that look like? So, for example, you're giving, let's say, a feedback to a sales rep. You're a sales representative. He's not been performing well, and then you tell him that imagine 9 o'clock in the morning, you come to the office, you open your system, and what you do is the first thing you do is you go to your CRM and you identify 5 prospects that you need to reach today, right? Now you have given him, you've tried to make him imagine a scenario by telling an anecdote, right? This is, yes, this is tactical level, this is operational brass tack level, but that's what essentially you do, where you are asked. you basically, what the bigger idea behind this is that you want him to be focused on your top client. That's a bigger idea, right? But you start with an anecdote. Let's look at another way of doing it. Make it personal. You know, if I can relate, if the problem that I have is a problem that you also had some point in your life, maybe the way you solve that problem could be relevant to me, right? So it could start something like, hey, you know what? I remember when I first joined in your role, even the same problem I was struggling with. I was struggling with whatever, I was struggling with the system, I was struggling with the appraisal, whatever that problem is. What you've suddenly done is now you've put yourself in the game. You've made it personal. You've shared a personal experience. And storytelling is about being personal, because when you're personal, you're emotional, you're relevant, you're direct, right? So make it personal. Don't feel shy to make it personal and share your experiences. The more vulnerable you are, the more relatable and likable you are, because we may like rock stars and celebrities, but we somewhere at some level we don't relate to them. They're from a different world. But we relate to people who have same problems like us or similar problems like us, and you want to hear from them. So make yourself relatable. Use metaphors. Metaphors we've seen past in some of the work that we have done, and so in fact even from some of the clients that we have heard, the metaphors has really done well. So something like, Yuvraj Singh had he was a top performer 2011 or so. I don't really remember the exact time, but he had cancer. He had to drop off. He had to go through a lot of these chemotherapy, and then when he came back, he again started blasting with the bat, right? So you could give example like, and this is just an example, Yuvraj had a bad phase. He faced real adversity, but he came back, right? And that's a metaphor that you can use for somebody who's gone through a rough phase, maybe in personal life, professional life, and you want him to bring him up to speed, really become a performer and a go-getter rather than being a person who's really complaining about himself. So you can use metaphors. Metaphors are amazing. They really work well, right? Inspire. Nothing like it. I think frankly, the gift that we can give each other is inspiring each other. I firmly believe personally in that. If I can inspire you through whatever I tell you, it could be the kind of work I do or my personal experience as an entrepreneur or as a professional, whatever. If there's something, if I could inspire you today or whenever we meet or whenever we talk, I think that's the greatest gift I can give you, more than any other gift, right? So inspire people, right? And it could look like, hey, you know what? I want, from 2 years from now, I want to see you in that position, doing this, achieving that, having 10 people report to you, reporting directly to the CHRO, CEO, or whomsoever. Now you're inspiring them, you're inspiring people. Now, these are some of the, what you say, mal masala ingredients of using storytelling techniques in giving feedback, right? It's up to you. There are many more, but because of the lack of time and real estate space on the slide, we were not able to put it here. But suffice to say, there are a lot of these things that you can really use to make feedback process an exchange of ideas, not a one-sided, top-down kind of communication.